This is why skipping detention might be a good idea. When I was in high school, I slacked off a lot. My junior year, my math teacher was pretty upset by this. Once during a parent-teacher meeting, he told my mom that I wasn't doing as well as I could and called me lazy. My mom agreed and stated that she wouldn't blame him if he pushed and punished me to work harder. From this day on, he did exactly that, always questioning me before anyone else and always sat next to me during exercises. This is when my classmates started realizing that he was a little obsessed with me and started teasing me about it. Right before Christmas break, he threw us a surprise party with chocolates and mock champagne. He poured me an extra glass and congratulated me for doing better. I drank the first glass he gave me, but not the second because I'm diabetic and had already had too much chocolate. During the next class, I felt extremely sick and almost fainted. I spent the rest of the day in the nurse's office and chalked it up to eating too much candy. A few weeks later, I failed a math test. He became extremely angry and yelled at me in front of everyone. The look in his eyes chilled me and I cried. He gave me detention but scheduled it hours later than the usual time and said he would personally be there as well. When I showed up, it was getting dark already and I noticed I was the only student there. Something felt off and a feeling deep inside my gut was pushing me to skip. Right when I decided to skip, I look over and see him walking towards me. Part 2 of why skipping detention might be a good idea. As he walked towards me, I was getting nervous. I told him that I had an emergency and I had to go, but I would email the school and reschedule later. Right after this, I ran off. As I was running away, he yelled at me and told me that I had to obey him and come to detention or he'd call my parents. At this moment, I didn't care. The feeling in my gut kept growing, so I sprinted to the bus and went home. I was afraid that he'd call my parents, but my parents greeted me normally when I got home, so I assumed he didn't. The next day, I was expecting to get an earful, but he wasn't there, and as weeks passed, he never came back. Then a shrink came to our class and asked if he'd like to talk about our math teacher, but no one knew why. Fast forward a few years later when I became a teacher and started chatting with my coworker. I mentioned his name, speaking to her about my weird, bizarre teacher and how I skipped attention. That's when one of the oldest workers there went pale hearing his name. It turns out a few days after I skipped attention, my math teacher was arrested for downloading child you-know-what from the dark web. He also had tons of snuff videos doing terrible things to children and teens. Now I always wonder what would have happened if I hadn't followed my gut instincts and stayed for detention that day with just me and him in that classroom. So I, 32, have been married to my husband, 34, for 6 years. Before we got married, he had me sign a prenup stating that our financials would always be separate and the only thing that we would share was an expense account to pay for our household-related fees. The reason for this was because he was making pretty good money and I was in graduate school, so my financial situation was pretty bad, but I signed nonetheless because I understood he wanted to protect himself. Anyway, fast forward to now, I've been out of school for 4 years and I make more than 3 times as much as he does. I've never asked him how much he makes and he's never asked me either. Anyway, 2 weeks ago I told him that I was thinking about buying a new car as the one I had was really old since I had it since my undergraduate days. He wasn't really interested and he just told me to get whatever I liked. So a week ago, I decided to make a plunge and get an Audi. I was pretty excited as I always wanted one. At the time, my husband was on a business trip and he got back yesterday. I showed him my car and he was really happy for me. However, later he asked me what my monthly payments were as the Audi was pretty new. At this point, I told him that I made the purchase in cash and that I had no monthly payments. He was taken back and asked with what money, and I answered that I made more than enough to be able to afford it. He didn't talk after that and I thought that was that. However, a few hours later, he came back to me and told me that he thinks we should void the prenup. This is where I might be the asshole because I laughed in his face. I asked him why I would agree to do that and his answer was that we're married and should share our financials. So I told him we've been married for 6 years and yet we've never shared our financials and I was fine with what we were doing. And his sudden change of heart was very suspicious. He called me a bunch of names and stormed out and didn't come home, and I guess he told his family about our fight. They called to berate me and say how he supported me while I was in school. He didn't, and now I'm wondering if I was an asshole. So, am I the asshole for laughing in my husband's face? Part 2, I laughed in my husband's face when he asked to void the prenup. I called into work and took a week off. I'm an independent contractor, so I didn't sign any new contracts. I sat my husband down and suggested that we should see a therapist. He refused. I asked him why he wanted to void the prenup. He said because he wanted to combine finances. So I asked to see his bank accounts, and he had been misusing his money and was virtually broke. He basically had less than half of what I spent on my Audi. He had also made a series of bad investments and had apparently sold his property that he owned in NE. But most of his money went to his gambling habit. I knew he gambled, but not at the rate that I saw. I asked where we went from here if he didn't want to go to marriage counseling. He replied that since I made more, he should quit his job and follow his dreams. He wants to be a professional gambler? Is that a thing? I don't know whose money he thinks he's going to use to finance that. I asked him who would support him while he was following his dreams. Since he hadn't supported me, I would also not be supportive. My parents helped me out with the bills while I was in grad school. He flipped out and said that I was lucky to have him and that he should have dumped me for a younger woman. I replied that I should have dumped him for a younger man. I know it was childish, but I couldn't help it. He also said that it was unnatural for me to be making more than he was and that we should have at least 3 kids by now. I confessed that I also lost my shit and told him that the only younger women who would date him were the drunk or desperate ones because he had crazy written all over him. After the whole fiasco, I packed my bags, went to some friend's house, got the number for a good divorce attorney from a friend, and I will meet with him this week and hopefully start the process. I texted my soon-to-be ex that I was filing. His response? He was never going to sign the divorce papers and I was stuck with him whether I liked it or not. Honestly, everything happened so fast that I'm still in shock. I don't even know if I overreacted by talking about divorce so fast. So there's the update. I'm not sure what comes next, but thanks for everything.
Am I wrong for telling my brother and sister-in-law that their pregnancy announcement was trashy? My family has a 21 plus adult-only gift exchange, volunteer only. If you sign up, you have to spend $20 on each person. We have a Google Doc with a list of things each person would like, their sizes, and favorite snacks. You follow the list, you spend $20 per person, and we have the exchange after the kids go to sleep. My sister-in-law Kelsey, 34 female, and my brother Kyle, 30 male, both signed up to be on the list. They asked to go last because they had something special they wanted everyone to open together. Everyone else followed the list and got people something they would like. Kelsey and Kyle spent $5 per person. It was a sonogram picture in a cheap dollar store frame and a note saying $35 has been donated to the baby in your name, and a 2XL shirt with puffy paint that said Baby Bella 2022. We all said congrats about the baby and talked about it for a bit. My dad then said, "Do you want to finish the exchange? This is great news, but we have to be heading home, so if you want to get the rest of the presents." Kelsey said, "That is the gift." Kyle got up to use the bathroom and my dad followed after him. They had an argument in the hallway and Kyle stormed out. My dad was like, "Everyone can take their gifts back from Kyle and Kelsey because this is bullshit," and they knew exactly what they were doing. A few people did take their gifts back and left, but the rest of us sort of sat there until it calmed down and then went home. Kyle ended up showing up at my house 2 days later with a real present and apologized. He said in a very angry tone, "Kelsey has been crying about it for days now, so thank Dad for ruining the surprise." He then asked if I liked the gift, and I said no. He asked why not. I said, "Well, everyone else got you a real present with thought put into it. You didn't even get me a shirt that fit, that was printed professionally, and then spent the majority of the money on yourself. It felt cheap and ruined the spirit of the exchange." He called me an asshole and left. So, am I? No. Am I wrong for asking my friend to not go to his painting class because my girlfriend would be modeling? So my 20 male and girlfriend 21 female go to a college that has a decently sized art program. I'm not overly involved in that side of things. I'm a computer science major and my girlfriend is an English literature major, so she's right on the edge of the art program. A close friend of mine is an art major. His program offers an optional art class sort of thing where they can meet 4 times a month to paint a model and they can bring the painting to one of their major classes for extra credit. This class isn't required and as far as I know, most people do it for fun. My friend is a great artist and I've seen a lot of his work and it's always amazing and incredibly detailed. Like almost photorealistic, and he hangs them up in his dorm. And here comes the problem for me. My girlfriend told me this week that she signed up and was selected to e-model for the first 4 classes of the semester. I didn't have a problem with this until I realized this would mean my friend would be seeing my girlfriend naked, painting her and hanging up a picture of my naked girlfriend in his room. I asked her first and told her I wasn't very comfortable with specifically my friend seeing her naked and said I'd feel more comfortable if she didn't do it. She said no and told me I was making this out to be sexual when it wasn't. I told her that it may not be sexual, but I still don't want my friend to have essentially a nude of her hanging in a place where me and the rest of my friends go to hang out regularly. If he paints her, then it's likely all of my friends are going to see my girlfriend nude, which is a huge problem for me. My girlfriend told me I was being overly insecure. So then I went to my friend as a guy. I assumed that since he was another man, he would get what I was saying better than a woman could. I explained to him the situation and he said no, as it's art and he gets no sexual pleasure from seeing the models naked. Usually it's old men in their 40s, but I doubt he won't get some level of arousal from seeing my girlfriend nude. Oh my god, this dude. He accused me of pornifying his art and he had the right to put it wherever. He also told my girlfriend and they both think that I'm an asshole. So am I? Yeah, you asked your girlfriend. First of all, your friend has nothing to do with this, okay? If you had a problem with it with your girlfriend, that's between you and her. She said no. Okay, you got pissy, you didn't like her answer, so you went behind her back and told your friend. Get the fuck out of here with that shit. Am I wrong for telling my sister not to name her daughter Chewbacca? My 24 female, sister 28 female found out she was pregnant 5 months ago. Recently, she and her husband 31 male announced that they were having a girl and finally decided on a baby name, Chewbacca. I was more than a bit shocked, even more so when I found out that the name was the product of a long discussion and compromise between them. My sister wanted to name their daughter after our late grandmother, Rebecca. Brother-in-law, who's obsessed with Star Wars, wanted to use a name from the movies. Before they knew they were having a girl, he wanted a son to name Chewie, which I still think is a bit odd, but it's not unheard of, so whatever. The problem is that he got attached to the name. Even after they found out they were having a girl, he didn't want to look for a female or gender-neutral Star Wars name. He still wanted Chewie. This is where it gets dumb. After arguing over it for a while, debating using one as a middle name, and sister pushing brother-in-law to choose a different name from the series, they somehow decided the best compromise would be just to mash the names together. When I asked my sister why she would agree to something so stupid, she got annoyed and told me that it's not like anyone would ever call her that. They'll use her nickname, Becca. I told her not to name her daughter Chewbacca and that she'll probably get bullied for having a name that sounds like a dog's name. She got mad and said her daughter is not a dog, which, obviously, and that what she named her child was none of my business. She asked me to leave if I was just going to badmouth her daughter. I told her I wasn't. I was just concerned about my niece getting bullied for having a stupid name. I think I did the right thing bringing up my concerns, but when I got home that night, I got a call from my mom telling me to drop it. She didn't like the name either, but said it wasn't our business and that my sister was right about just calling her Becca. I think both my mom and sister think the whole nickname thing is a clever way of getting around brother-in-law to get the name they actually want. But what if he insists on his side of the family using the nickname Chewy? But I don't know. Maybe the Becca thing will work? I know I'm sticking my nose in where it isn't wanted, but is it a bad thing to bring up the future problems of having the name Chewbacca, or am I really overstepping? Am I wrong for banning my mother-in-law out of my house after she hung a picture of my husband's ex on the wall? My husband, 30, and I, 31, have just bought our first house together. We're loving it and we're excited to decorate it together. Unfortunately, my husband travels a lot for work and we've already had new furniture orders arrive, but I couldn't do it all myself. My mother-in-law offered to help and I agreed. Yesterday, I got back from work at 8 and was shocked to see one of the walls was full of framed pictures that my mother-in-law put there. That is not the main problem because these pictures were from his childhood, graduation, and birthdays. But then I saw the biggest framed picture of them all, and it is of him and his ex on their wedding day. Context. Mother-in-law adores my husband's ex. She brings her up all the time and reminisces about the past years with her. Not only that, but she includes her in events and holidays which cause issues between us. I lashed out on my mother-in-law, asking her why the hell that picture is on the wall and how she thought it was an appropriate thing to do. I told her to take it down in that instance, but she got defensive and said, "This is part of Derek's life and you cannot erase it." Yes, you can. Then went on about how many hours she spent working on this wall and how I should be a little bit more appreciative. I lost my cool and flipped out on her. I took a chair and removed the picture. I told her to take the picture and leave, but she tried to say it wasn't just the ex in the picture, but my husband as well. But I told her I'd throw it out if she doesn't leave. She left, but started texting me saying that I'm jealous, bitter, overbearing, and controlling. I responded telling her she disrespected me in my own home by what she did and proceeded to ban her from my house. She called my husband and forwarded a screenshot of the ban. He called me and we talked. Then he said his mom ought to know better, but she didn't, and I was right to be angry, but banning her from the house was an overreaction, like a crazy overreaction. He tried to get me to call her and cancel the ban, but I refused. He then ranted about how unfair I was being to make such a decision when it's our house and not just mine. Conversation got nowhere, and now I'm waiting for him to get home to talk. My in-laws are upset with me saying I went overboard with this reaction and urged me to let my mother-in-law back in the house and drop this whole thing like it never happened. So am I wrong for banning her? Am I wrong for naming my child behind my wife's back? So my wife and I, 27 female and 29 male, recently had a baby, a sweet baby girl, an absolute ball of joy. We started discussing names a few months before she was born, but we just kept getting into arguments because we just couldn't come to an agreement. I'm a traditional man. I like traditional names with a rich history and profound meaning. My wife, on the other hand, wants to name our child something unique, something that literally no one else on the earth will think of. Some of her suggestions include Huhi, Juji, Yaba, and Booza. Buzza? Booza. Buzza. I like Yaba. Yabba dabba doo. Anyone can say that these names are absolutely ridiculous, and she will probably never land a respectable job. By the way, we're both Caucasian, so these are not cultural names or anything. I suggested some names like Amelia, Ella, and Sophia, but she said those were too common. We put off the topic of names for a while, but naturally after she was born, we started talking about it again. She insisted on the name Buzza, but I absolutely refused. I told her no one will take her seriously with a name like that, and that she was just pursuing the novelty of a unique name without thinking about the actual works for her. I realized that she was completely set on the name that she chose, and there was no other way I could convince her otherwise. So the next morning, I went by myself to register our daughter's name because I was worried my wife would go and do it first. I chose a really pretty name for her that wasn't too old-fashioned, and I thought my wife would be okay with it. But when I got home and told her, she was furious with me. She said I was an asshole, but I think she'd be the bigger asshole for giving our daughter a name that could ruin her life. I think you're the asshole-ish. You should never go behind your partner's back and name your child something without both consent. Without the consent from both parents. But what the fuck is Yabba Dabba? Or what was it, Booza? Like, what is wrong? What is wrong with you guys? What about... Am I wrong for telling my son I was disappointed after he and his wife lied about my grandson's birth date? My son, 23, and his wife just had a baby boy. Everyone is overjoyed and excited, but there have been some issues that have risen recently. When my daughter-in-law was pregnant, I suggested that I host a welcoming party for my grandson right after she get discharged from the hospital. I made arrangements and even emptied a room for them to stay, but for some reason she was against it and said she'd rather spend the first few weeks at home with her newborn. Not only that, but she said no to the welcoming party. My husband and I talked to my son and he said, "We'll see." But just a couple of days ago, we found out that my daughter-in-law had given birth 2 weeks ago and no one knew about it. My nephew told me and I immediately called my son. He confirmed it. I told him this was not acceptable, lying just because they didn't want a welcoming party and love and support being given from family. I told him I was disappointed because for one, he ruined our welcoming for our grandbaby, and also I invited family members and they're all rightfully disappointed as well. He said it was his last resort after I kept pushing and made his wife uncomfortable, but that was not appreciated because we were just trying to celebrate the new family member in a proper manner. We had an argument and he ended the call upon saying I ruined his joy for his newborn. My husband started texting him since he stopped replying to our phone calls and is now threatening to block my nephew for tattling, but I think that my nephew was decent enough to inform the family. Otherwise, God knows how long my son and his wife are going to hide their son just to keep us at arm's length. We've always been kind and welcoming to my daughter-in-law and her family. I don't know why she would do this and disrespect the family like that. On the other hand, some family members see it as a justified action because we insisted on the party. I don't know if you know this, man, but we are in the middle of a panoramic, and so I understand not wanting to expose your kids to people who you don't know where they've been when kids have such a compromised immune system. Back up. Am I wrong for calling my sister's husband useless? My 17 female, sister 34 female called me saying that her work had an emergency and she needed to get there ASAP and needed me to watch her kids because no one else can. I rushed over there just to find her husband locked in his game room playing video games. I asked her why she called me over if he was home and she said he didn't want to babysit because it was his only day off. Sister left and I started hanging with the kids. I was changing the baby's diaper and the other kids wanted a snack. I told them to ask their dad to make it for them because the baby had a blowout and it was going to take me a while to clean him up. Well, their dad sent them back upstairs and told them to ask me again. After cleaning the baby up, I made the kids a snack and their dad came out to eat and told me not to let the kids interrupt him on his day off. By the way, he works part-time from home 6 days a week. I kind of snapped at him and told him it was my day off too and that he's a useless fucking father and husband if his wife has to rely on her teenage sister rather than her own husband. He started telling me I was disrespectful and didn't understand how hard parenting is. And I told him he clearly doesn't understand how hard it is either since he considers parenting his own children babysitting. He ended up kicking me out and apparently my sister was forced to come home because he told her she needed to figure it out since I'm her sister. I feel like I may have been the asshole because my sister is mad at me, her husband is mad at me, my mom is mad at me for causing drama, but my dad thinks it's funny and agrees with me. I definitely didn't need to call him names, but I just hate this guy so much. We have argued about things in the past as well, so we already don't have a great relationship. My sister is saying I need to apologize to him and he is threatening to never let me in the kids' lives if I keep disrespecting him. So, am I the asshole here? For everyone that has asked, no, he does not take care of the kids normally. My sister takes him to daycare during the day and then picks him up on her way home. She is the breadwinner and primary caretaker. Also, I got a few questions of, does she pay you? Not exactly, but she will randomly take me on expensive shopping sprees and will regularly buy things from my Amazon wishlist instead. Am I wrong for no longer bringing dinner for my wife after she claimed I never cook? I work at a nice restaurant as a cook, and every day when I get off from work, I always cook dinner for my wife and our 2 kids, 8 male and 6 female, at the restaurant before coming home. The only time I don't cook for them are on the weekends when I'm off, and that's when my wife does the cooking. We usually trade off who makes breakfast and lunch for the kids every other day, but for the week, I'm always the one bringing home dinner. Weekends, we sometimes get together with friends, and they come over to the house. My wife usually cooks and I set the table and clean afterwards. One of her friends, Stacy, asked how come I never do any of the cooking and is it always on my wife all the time making meals for the kids, especially when I'm a cook myself. Instead of correcting her, she sort of laughed and went along with making jokes about, you know how it is. And Stacy laughed because her ex-husband was the same way. And then sort of ripped on me in a joking way how I better bug up before I become an ex too. My wife just said, well, let's see if he actually listens and starts cooking for once, joking about all the time I spend in the kitchen at work but won't do the same at home. It really pissed me off. I'm not the husband that just doesn't do anything after I'm home from work. I cook food for her and the kids at work, and on top of that, I make separate dishes for each of them. What she wants and what the kids want. All that after standing on my feet all day. We talked about it once they left because I don't appreciate being told I'm not doing something she knows for a fact I do. She didn't want to apologize for it because it was all just to be a funny joke. Even after telling her about how it hurt my feelings being put down like that. My wife said she felt like she had to go along with the joke so there wouldn't be any awkward vibes. But I said fine, if she can't apologize for something that was mean, just so she could laugh along with her friends, then I won't keep doing something she already claims I don't do. She's mad that I'm refusing to feed her over what happened instead of letting it go, but I can't help but feel mad about being made fun of like that when I'm busting my ass to provide for my family and still making sure they have food on the table every evening. She just thinks I'm an asshole for how I'm reacting when she's already tired at the end of the day, but still having to make food for herself. So, am I the asshole?